Good morning. Now, very interesting materials and exciting ideas. Thank you, Penny, Captain Vinay, and Arthur for the presentations. I'm sure you have a lot of questions on some of those new technologies and ideas. So why don't I just open the floor now and take some questions before maybe we can have another round of discussion with the panel. Any questions from the floor? Please identify yourself before you ask the question.
This is Anil Arora, Unique Shipping. I know, of course, there were interesting things and new ideas, and of course, this is a shipping dialogue. But there was one very basic thing in Vinay's presentation: planet in peril. Who is responsible? Of course, there are a lot of things we talked about, and there are a lot of actions we talked about, possible actions. But there is some very basic things which we also need to look at, and for which we all can be responsible. And I'm sure, I think Civic Exchange can also, sort of encourage that. For example, how many of us use cars and not public transport? Why? How many of are wearing suits today in spite of the hot weather warning, making people to turn on their ACs in full power, which could be saved? What about the local consumption? How many of us yearn for all the good things from abroad? Why not local? All these things contribute to the environment. We can talk of a lot of technologies, a lot of things. Let's start with the basics. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone who want to echo that point? I'm sure everyone. Any follow-up response?
I would comment like this. Ocean transport, as I mentioned yesterday, is responsible for 94% of transfer of goods, raw material, finished goods, luxury goods, food chain, from place where it is produced to place where it is required. If it wasn't for ocean transport, some countries in this world would be prosperous, advanced. Some will remain poor and underprivileged. So this is a man's march to prosperity, and everybody has a right to prosper. Some were denied that right by whatever reason. That's history. But I think this is a natural evolution. We cannot and we should not restrict it in any way whatsoever. If there's a problem, solve it. Dancing around that will not solve the problem. It won't go away. And that's the message to learn. I think we should not deny ourselves of luxury or better living conditions simply because it might anger somebody or pollute the environment. Find a solution like the one exists for NOx. We are dancing around the problem. Here is a solution. I have personally made 35 calls to engine makers. Not one was returned. So there's a conspiracy. And I dare say this, having succeeded in this particular project, it's time that somebody with courage and conviction comes forward and hold the hand of TCC and USC. Let's do it. Thank you.
Thank you. May I ask Penny, is anything at the government level that you can do to encourage or to even kind of support similar ideas that Captain Vinay has just tell us? Are there things that you can work together?
Absolutely. In fact, on the topic of technology development, in particular, to solve some of the problems that we have created for ourselves as human beings, we do work together to help advance technologies, and I was very pleased to hear the update on this particular technology. In fact, we've had now at least a 3-year engagement with the TCC group in the United States on the progress and some of the challenges that they're having, and hopefully getting it to the point where it can actually be really deployed as an alternative technology for complying with some of these requirements. The NOx requirement sounds like it's might be first before the SOx. We'll see. I don't know. So there are definitely partnerships and collaboration that are going on specifically on the technology side. I mean, just I do echo your Mr. Aurora's comments. I think there is a lot we can do as individuals, of course, to help the planet heal a little bit or recover somehow. But I also understand we're in a global market, and that's something that is part of progress, if you will, as human beings. And so I think understanding that reality and accepting that reality, we have to look to solutions that we've to problems that we've all contributed to creating. So.
Thank you, Jeff.
Thanks. As Simon pointed out, I'm Jeff from the cruise terminal. I have a question for a rather broad question for Penny, which is just we've heard a bit about different emission abatement technologies. We talked about onshore power. We talked about improved combustion methods. Scrubbers were raised indirectly. We'll hear later about LNG. Just wondering what the experience has been on the U.S. West Coast over time, over which technologies have proven popular, which are sort of trending, if you will, and becoming more popular. Are there differences between different types of shippers, such as passenger shippers versus dry bulk versus container? And are there any geographical differences too? For example, in Southern California, where it's all sort of coal-burned power, versus Pacific Northwest, where there's a lot of hydro-generated electricity. Thanks.
Sure, certainly. Thank you for the question. I'll start with the latter part. Just a correction there. It's most of the California energy is actually natural gas, just the grid there. But of course, the Pacific Northwest is blessed with all of the hydropower and the very clean and relatively inexpensive power up there. So just to correct on the coal side. So some of the technologies that are trending, I think, in California and on the West Coast. So not just even though California is the real leader in terms of pushing regulation out and incentive programs to advance the emission reductions and hopefully force technology a little bit. There's been some advancements in the Pacific Northwest as well, quite a bit, in fact. I think what we've seen on the ship side in California is shore power. Shore power, alternative maritime power, that's a big one. And in large part, that has to do, I think, with the regulation that has required it, right? We have the 50% requirement. There's going to be an 80% requirement coming up here in 2018. And so that's been on the ship side in terms of the berthing of ships. That's been the real driver and the technology that's really taking off. I think the fuel switching again has been in California. It's been in place since 2009. That's also a technology that's technology, if you will, a cleaner fuel technology that's been taken up quite a bit. With the implementation of the North American ECA, we've seen the Pacific Northwest move a lot towards LNG. Actually, not a lot, but there's movement from carriers, bulk and cargo and ro-ros and things like that. Carriers that operate either 100% or a very large period of time within the ECA So they've made some calculations that looks like LNG is probably going to be a better route for them in the long run. There's some transition now, ships on order, deals being made with the power companies to provide the actual LNG up in the Pacific Northwest for some of the shipping operations there. I think when it comes to the cruise ships, they're also operating most of the time within the North American ECA. They're going up and down the coast until they get into Mexico, and then until Mexico has an ECA, they don't have to comply when they're there. We've definitely seen a lot of interest in the scrubber technologies, absolutely. There's been some discussion around LNG. As far as I am aware, nothing has taken off with the cruise ships just yet on that front. So at this point, it's really the scrubbing technology that's being deployed and of interest for cruise ships that are operating within the North American ECA. Is that helpful?
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
Carnival just ordered for LNG.
For North
cruise
America.
ships.
For North America.
They didn't say where they'll end up. 2 are for a German line.
Okay.
Yeah, just Carnival just ordered 4 LNG ships.
Okay.
Two are for a German line, so they'll probably stay in Europe. The other 2, they haven't earmarked where in the world they'll end up.
All right. Thanks for that info.
Okay, thank you, Penny. Now, I would like to turn to Arthur because you talk about shoreside power, and obviously, in the last couple of weeks, we had some discussion here in Hong Kong about whether the government should, install shoreside power at the Kai Tak cruise terminal, and then, because of the government's decision to, at this point, not to consider doing that, then it created a lot of, sentiments in the community. Now, what would be the real challenge, really, to push for shoreside power in Hong Kong? What's the state of play? I know the technology is ready, but we need things other than technology to make things happen. So what do you think? What kind of factors you need to make it happen here?
Yeah. So actually, for the shore connection, it is not the problem of just one country or one region. Okay, it need to be coordinated among the different all the ports on the trade routes. Okay, that's actually one of the key points of people that are opposed to the shore connection. Okay, the other guys doesn't have it. So if I only go to this port, it's not efficient for me. Okay, if I make all the investment, okay, but then it will become a sort of a chicken and egg problem. So that's why possibly there need to be a regional effort. Okay, maybe in the Pearl River Delta. Actually, I understand that for Shenzhen they have been trying to persuade us to let's do it together or something like that. And maybe you have noticed that in one of my slides, Europe actually last year there's a European directive that all the 10T network need to be shore connection ready by 2025, and right now they have a subsidy for that. Okay, so to encourage the different countries to start to both study it and also to install it. So it's like, I think it's like maximum of 50% on the feasibility study on the subsidy and 20% on the project. So something like that. So we need incentive from the government in order for the ships to try to start to adopt, and at the same time we need legislation. Maybe just some wild idea. Maybe we tell the industry or the market that, okay, like we have a plan, like 5-year, 3-year, or even 10-year, this will be enforced. And in the meantime, we have subsidies for you. And that will really push things forward. You cannot just rely on the industry alone. Otherwise, nobody will move for sure.
If I may add to that, just to support what the comment you just made, that we find that to be a very useful method of implementation in the U.S., where there is an incentive program available with the knowledge that there is a regulation that's going to be coming down the road at some point, 5 years, 4 years, 3 years, but there's some knowledge and understanding that will become a regulation, and in the meantime, that those incentives are only available until the regulation comes into place. So that the idea there is to incentivize industry to take advantage of that money before the regulation comes into place, so you get a little bit of ahead of time or advanced implementation and compliance before you have to comply. So we find that to be a useful strategy.
Okay, thank you, Penny. Captain Renee, you talk about your research collaboration with USC, and that you will continue with the trial, and it will take time to be able to show us more results, good results. But now, of course, I mean, we kind of cannot wait. We really want to improve the environment, improve the planet as soon as we can. So on that basis, before the TPI technology is really becoming widely accepted and used, what do you think would be the next things that we should pursue in the interim period in terms of emission abatement?
Good question. I would like to answer like this. There are two roadblocks, or two potholes to the whole process. If the engine makers had contributed their massive brain power and support to building materials, this research would expedite. One roadblock I see is fabricating a cylinder head to house a transient plasma electrode. At this point in time, we are using the existing air start valve into the cylinder head for the transient plasma electrode. We are not able to place the electrode in the right place in the combustion chamber. But this is only to prove whether this electrode can even withstand the massive pressure differential, the vibrations and the temperatures within the combustion chamber. That has been proved. Our next stage will be to purchase and modify cylinder heads. It will be a lot easier if the engine maker, who had limitless resources, jump in and help us in that aspect. That was one. The second part is taking it from lab to implementation on ships. There are always problems which you didn't think existed before, and you have to find solution for it. But we're very confident about the first trial conducted on a ship where the electrodes have been proved, and also the pulse generator which provides the burst of energy, that has been modified, and we are ready to go. Right now we are negotiating some discussion and agreements. So I would give it difficult to put a time on that because it all depends on the success and be able to measure the outcome of that. How much fuel was injected, how much power was generated. And the emission side is easier. That is remediation. It has already been proved on a relatively small ship on the coast where the NOx were reduced by 96%. And you cannot ignore that. It was put on the auxiliary diesel generators. It will not be hard to place that also on the main engine exhaust systems. It's a matter of applying bigger pulse power generators. The similar problem was faced when the car exhaust contained far too many pollutants. In California, they're one of the most stringent requirements for automobile exhaust. But that was overcome with catalytic converters just as the exhaust goes out. And now the air you breathe outside is cleaner than anywhere you may experience. I lived in Southern California for 14 years and then moved to Vancouver, and they were amazed. This car, 22-year-old, has got one of the best readings for exhaust, came from California. Thank you.
Thank you. Please.
I think, new technologies are always welcome, like this TPI, but as you said, we don't have indefinite time. And all the rules and regulations, the regulators think of, are based on existing technologies. And then, of course, people want to tinker with things, and we get some improvements here and there. I think looking at the scenario now, let us say even if TPI comes in, let's say after a few years, but the regulations will be different. So it is a big challenge for an individual company or to do, it'll come, it may come, but it could be almost impossible. As you say, the roadblocks by now by the designers themselves. And then it could be the regulation and the various things. So looking at today's scenario, why, for example, this, shore power or shore ironing is not taken off, is a simple reason, and we talked about incentivization. You may incentivize the port authority or whatever, whoever is doing it here. But what about the ships? How will you incentivize them? And then, as he just mentioned, as Arthur just mentioned, that it could be here in Hong Kong, but ships are going worldwide. What happens to me in other ports? And things like that. So it is really not taken off, especially because of the commercial interest. After all, shipping, though doing all the things, it's also a business. And similarly, now, for example, we talked about the fuel switching. What is the problem in the fuel switching? Though we are managing somehow. We had a few stoppages, we had a few almost near misses, probably we had a few incidents. So we are just managing. Why we cannot do it? Again, it's got to do something with the engine design. The engine designs, what we are using is designed for heavy fuel oil. Now we are saying the pumps may be worn out. Even my new pump would just survive for a short while. We have still not seen the long-term effects of it. Now that we have extended ECAs already, people are having different problems. And if we had a worldwide, universal limit, and we had to trade always on these fuels, of course, you cannot run on the existing engines. Technology will have to change. And that is why I think LNG has a much brighter future. Because there we are starting from the scratch. We are designing an engine which can run on LNG. We are not modifying something too much. So I think LNG has a brighter future compared to others. And of course, but it'll take time to come. For the existing engines, I think the existing thing what we need to do is, instead of trying to, do everything by operational procedures and managing these things, one thing which could be encouraged is the use of low sulfur heavy fuel oils. The new breed of fuel oils which are coming here and there, I think if they can be encouraged and also included in the ISO specifications, which are for other fuels, I think this could be an intermediate solution because the engines are designed for heavy fuel oil, and if we encourage, more production, more availability of these fuels, which is already there, and deal with the other, regulatory things, I think this could be the intermediate solution. And of course, I think the LNG is the final solution down the line, when we have more bunkering facilities and whatever.
It's a very structured question. Allow me to dissect it and I'll try to respond. LNG, easily said, but to use the technology on board, you have to change the mindset of the operators on board. It's a huge risk. I would not hasten into that, and there's no rationale to do that. The second thing was the plasma ignition and the plasma remediation is here and has been proved, ready to go in the present engines. I think the remediation of exhaust can be conducted sooner, and the puzzle of tier 3 can be resolved. You can have 0 NOx. And lastly, I would mention about anything you invent ashore, succeeded ashore, to take it to the ship, the classification societies must approve when it comes to safety of that, the ship and the personnel on board. We are collaborating with American Bureau of Shipping in the US. They participate heavily, and I think they will guide us as to how to take this technology to the ships. But I think the most promising, if only the world puts their minds together and resources together, it can be a truthful thing, maybe within 6 to 12 months, even before you are required to comply with Tier 3 requirements of NOx.
That would be great. I wanted to also just respond to some of the things that you mentioned, Mr. Arora. You mentioned the shore power. How do you get the shore power incentives to the ships, right? And I know the experience we have in California ports in particular, there's a heavy role that the ports and the port authorities have played in that. And they have been extremely active and very effective at reaching out to the ships and the ship owners and operators themselves to offer up the incentives and to help them walk them through the process of getting those incentives and getting the equipment installed on their ships. So there's and I think that's a good model, but it does take a lot of work on the part of the port and the port authority to do that. The second thing I wanted to address, and really with a question back to you, on the low sulfur heavy fuel oil, are there things in the literature that you can share on the operation of this fuel in the engines, and you know, has it been tested and experienced, and can you share that with me?
Yeah, we personally haven't used it in our company, but this fuel has already been tested. I think if yesterday ExxonMobil was there, probably they would have talked a little bit about it. And there are about now 7 or 8 fuels available. And I think fact that so many companies can make it in the refineries, it's not so difficult, looks like. And considering the properties, the people are using it. The general problems with the diesel engines are not there, because you are using the existing systems. The viscosity is no problem, the lubricity is no problem. There are minor problems with pour point, etc., but which can be managed by operational much easier than managing the engine itself.
And it's having, as far as you can tell, the wear and tear sort of issues with the pumps and the seals, the gaskets, things like that, that's not
you
an
see,
issue?
wear and tear issue is something like what we are using now with, for example, gas distillate fuels, for example. It's a long-term thing, which you cannot really make out. But the thing is that these are more like the fuel oils for which the engines were designed. So that is the plus point. So that's why we think, you know, that it will be similar. Let's put it this way. The only thing will be the availabilities and the compatibilities. So there, that's why I'm saying, if people could standardize that and bring it into the ISO standards and things like that, that could improve the situation, the availability and the standardization.
I beg to differ with you. There is no such thing as heavy fuel oil. It is called heavy fuel oil because of its ingredients. There are 2 types, distillate fuels and heavy fuels. This is the lowest form left over after the refining process. It can be by heat or cracked by using chemicals. So you cannot say it's heavy, but it's not heavy. So heavy fuel oil with low sulfur creates its own problems. Low sulfur is an enemy. The moment you do that, it affects the combustion, it affects the lubricity, it affects the viscosity, and then you come with the magic solutions of chiller, cooler, and I think that's no. Imagine there are only 6 people on ship. One time there used to be 41 people on ship. And to have them, to make the equipment foolproof and foolproof is not easy. Somebody has to operate the ship. It's not like a jet engine. It'll go with no help from the crew. So I think that's a daydream, and it will not happen. Either you have no sulfur, and then you have to take care of what are the effects of that on the plunger barrel. To give you an example, I mentioned yesterday, normal plunger barrel assembly will last for 18,000 hours. Today with this, they barely last 4,000 hours. The injectors, they disintegrate. So all this technology will not happen provided you just go with the existing system but treat the exhaust. Thank you.
Thank you. I will allow one last question.
As informed yesterday by ExxonMobil, agreed by ExxonMobil, the fuel oil with low sulfur is incompatible, creating a lot of problem at the moment, and it's going to take a lot of time. And as I suggested yesterday also, 30 years back, all ships were running with low sulfur, diesel oil, gas oil sort of a thing in all ports in the world. There were no issues with sulfur, SOx, NOx, particulate at that time. So if little bit modifications, etc. are done, it will really help the ship staff and the people who are running the ships today, instead of having major problems with incompatibility with the heavy fuel oil with low sulfur. Thank you.
Anyone want to? Okay.
I have a question
Please.
for the audience, actually. So the report that I very briefly summarized that was conducted by the California Academy, Maritime Academy, that is the only source that I'm aware of sort of a broad survey of vessel operators on their experience with using these new fuels. So I'm wondering if there's anybody in the audience that is aware of anything more recent, more comprehensive, or just something, another survey or another something that's been published that you could share, because I'd be very interested in, particularly in learning more recent experience with using these fuels.
Thank you, Penny. Anyone from the audience who can?
I think there is no report as yet because it is too recent. You see, these fuels have just been started using from 1st of January. That's only a few months. It's too short a period. And as what the other gentleman just said about the incompatibility, that's correct. Presently, there's problems because it's only been few months. There are a number of companies using their own methods to get this type of fuel. That is why I said about the standardization. That is the key. If we can standardize these things, because it appears the technology is not so great, because so many people can make it. So if the standardization can be achieved, I think that is the key. Because in any case, we even take heavy fuel oil from one port to the other, there are problems of incompatibility. So standardization, I think, is the key for these type of fuels. And I think what Vinay just said about the, about the pumps not working and all that, I think he's mixing with the gas oils. There's a problem with the gas oils for low viscosity, low lubricity, etc. These fuels do not have that problem. If you see their specification, they have sufficient lubricity, they have sufficient other properties. It's only one property which is being affected is the pour point.
Thank you. Now, I think in response to Penny's question or pledge, we've got friends from the Hong Kong Environmental Protection Department here. Maybe you should take note that perhaps this is something that you should go out, reach out, and talk to the operators once the regulations is put in place, because these will become very useful information for not just the industry, but also for the policymakers to try and understand a bit more about the operation challenges that's been experienced by the users, and then in the record, then we can share those informations to say our friends from the mainland, because they are also pushing for similar practices in their own ports. So perhaps with that, thank you for joining us in this panel discussion. Please thank our panelists here.